What? Yavniel. This is where the converts go, Afrikaans converts.
It's 7:15 South Africa time, 7:45 in Israel, and a big welcome to everyone watching us around the world. We're going live in 15 minutes, but until then, we have pre-chat with everyone who's joining us from around the world. So big welcome to everyone who's busy viewing us. Please let us know where you're watching us from. And let's start with a big welcome to Nitsana, who joins us from where, Nitsana? From Tel Aviv, I presume.
Yeah. Hi, how are you, Howard?
I believe it was a 32-degree day in Tel Aviv, and Johannesburg will be 0 degrees tonight.
Oh, really?
And
it's going
so in
hot.
case you're wondering, we have Melanie's joining us from Cape Town. Melanie, I believe there were storms and wet and misery in Cape Town today, and about 6,000 people now homeless.
Yes, the storms have been horrific. In fact, I had my shutters blown out from my windows today, 75-kilometer winds. It's been terrible.
And our thoughts are obviously with the homeless and the people who are living in shacks, who at this terrible time of immense rain and wind suffered the great brunt of the bad weather and the winter that's busy striking us. And then we have the team from Johannesburg, the Koleinu team from Johannesburg. Introduce yourselves and tell everyone why you sitting all bundled up. You need to unmute yourselves.
Yeah, we came in earlier, hours ago, and we put the heaters on here, and so we're now warm and snugly in here. So I'm Wendy Hendler, and this is Roseanne Sack, and we are the Koleinu team in Joburg, and we work with Mel in Cape Town. And we've been wanting to have this webinar for a long time. Howie, we've worked on this and we're very thrilled that it's finally happening.
Fantastic. So just to explain to Nitsana, we have so far registered this evening over 1,800 devices, which will get us over 5,000 people watching us live this evening. And then we'll be watched by many more thousands of people in the next week or two as our webinar remains live on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Zoom for people to watch. So we get a fantastic audience and an audience around the world. So if I can ask everyone who's watching us around the world to tell us where you're watching from. We have Diane, who's freezing in Cape Town. We have Ray in Bloemfontein. And we have Rona saying the storm is incessant, huge winds, rain and cold. We have Joanne in Pretoria. And we have Arbiter in Beit Shemesh, who's watching us, and Neville is in Cape Town. And you'll see Nicola is in London, busy watching us, and you'll see this amazing audience and this fantastic community that we've built around the world of people who get together and want to be educated, want to be informed, and want to participate live in a webinar, because these things are never one-way events. Everyone asks questions, everyone contributes, everyone has a discussion, and they're very casual and chilled. But we're so happy that the team from Koleinu have joined us this evening. And maybe, Wendy, you can tell Nitsana a little bit about the work that Koleinu does.
Yeah, sure. So we started Koleinu about 10 years ago. The reason actually we started is that both Roseanne and myself are victims of sexual abuse at the hands of a medical doctor here in Johannesburg. So we struggled to know where to turn and where to get help and how to deal with it. And we just felt there was a need in our community for a specialized organization dealing with abuse. And so we started with a helpline. We have about 10 highly qualified volunteers manning our helpline. And then we got involved in advocacy and training. So we're very passionate and out there and making noise and fighting for for victims. We cover the whole spectrum of domestic abuse and then also child sexual abuse. So, we're making an impact. We have a long way to go, obviously, but I think there's been a shift with like 10 years of a spotlight shone on abuse in our community. We're very passionate about this work. And the work that you do, is also just has our heart. So we're very grateful to you.
And
wow, that's amazing.
You've expanded as well to Cape Town, and you now have Melanie in Cape Town assisting as well.
Yeah. No, it's wonderful. Melanie's holding the single-handedly, and we work so closely together. Over to you, Mel.
Yeah, I'm so humbled and so grateful to be part of Koleinu. It's the most incredible organization to belong to. And Wendy and Roseanne and I hold hands together and work together. And we've done so many interesting cases. And Kol HaKavod, I can say to them how they've taught me and trained me has been amazing. That I feel able to hold the fort here.
So Nitsana, when we began, Roseanne and Wendy contacted me and said, we have to do something about the sexual abuse of women on the 7th of October. And that's where really the seeds of this webinar came from. And I, at that moment, said, we need to get the Sheryl Sandberg documentary, which had not yet been released, which we're going to be showing this evening as well. But you've been very vocal as well, Nitsana, yourself, about the lack of support that the victims of the 7th of October, particularly the female victims, those who were sexually abused on the 7th of October, you've been very vocal about the lack of support that they've received from women organizations around the world.
Indeed, from day one, I was calling for the women organizations and all the UN organizations and all the Me Too organizations and all those who yelled and screamed and condemned and held conferences in sexual abuse in time of the war. I was calling them, where are you? Where are you? How come you don't raise your voice? How come you keep silent? How come you ignore these atrocities that Hamas committed to our women, to our girls on October 7th? And how come you keep silent with the hostages, the female hostages that are held by Hamas now and going through sexual abuse every single day? Where are you? I mean, using rape as a weapon of war is something known. In every armed conflict, you will find it. You found it with Daesh when they took over villages in Iraq and Syria. You found them in the Ukraine and Russia war. The Russian soldiers go and rape women in Ukraine. You find it in Kosovo, in Serbia. You find it everywhere. But we brought people from Kosovo, women that were raped and are willing to speak about it, that investigated and researched all the use of rape as a weapon of war in all the armed conflict over the past 30 years. And they told us that what Hamas did, unprecedented. There was nothing like that, nothing. Because they didn't just rape the women. They nailed them to the trees in group raping them, and they butchered them at the time that they're raping them, and they're beheading them after they rape them, and they burn their bodies after they rape them. This is not just to humiliate or to show that you are better than your enemy. This is an abuse that I've never seen before. Yet, all keep silent. So we, in Shurat Ha Din, had to be vocal. We went to the International Criminal Court to indict the Hamas terrorists, the Nukhba terrorists, not necessarily for the murders that they committed or the beheading or the mutilating or burning babies alive, but for the rape. The rape is a horrible issue. And today, in modern days, that everybody is so sensitive to sexual abuse and so many organizations are rising up and so many conferences and condemnations in the UN, investigations after each and every conflict. When it comes to Jews, you say no words? It's unacceptable.
You must have seen earlier this week Roger Waters on the Piers Morgan show, where he denied the rape of women. What does one do when you have celebrities, so-called celebrities, who go up in public platforms. I mean, I think Piers Morgan humiliated the man, and he seemed to be rather mentally deranged himself. But what does one do when one comes up against this denialism? I mean, we even had the former foreign minister of South Africa who got up in Parliament, who said the atrocities of the 7th of October, they have context, are not true, are not accurate. What's our response?
Look, what do you do against the Holocaust denials? What do you do? So you just speak to the people who are still normal. Roger Waters had a very popular song saying that they comfortably dumb. So here you go. Roger Waters finally became comfortably dumb. And he's known with his anti-Semitic approach to Israel, to Jews. And obviously, he will deny anything that happened there. And you can't convince him different. What you need to do is to stick to the truth and convince those who are neutralized, those who are not involved, those who are still did not get brainwashed to believe that October 7th didn't happen. One more thing you can do is perhaps now, 9 months into the war, when Israel loses legitimacy in the world, to come and show these horrific movies, videos that the terrorists took at the time that they were massacring our women, our children, our elderly. Show them to the world. They didn't take any rape videos. Didn't take rape. But they took enough to show the world what happened on October 7th. And if people, after watching these videos, still deny it happened, just it's your case. Don't deal with these people. Go to the one who are still have something in their heart and will not keep adamant after watching these videos and will turn to be on the side. Give it legitimacy to dismantle Hamas, because these are monsters and they have to be diminished. So they have to be, each and every one.
Roseanne and Wendy, how have South African women's organizations responded to the rapes and the sexual abuse of the 7th of October?
They've been shockingly silent, horrendously and unacceptably and just heartbreakingly silent. So we've reached out to all the women's organizations for comment, and no response. We do know that many of them concentrate on local issues and they don't get involved with international issues, but there are those, and plenty of them. We've found at least 4 of them that do make strong comments and do engage on the issue of internationally based conflict-related sexual violence, and those have kept quiet about Hamas on October 7th, and that is unacceptable, and that has to be called out, and that's what we're doing. It's important. Where are they? It's fine if they don't talk about it in general. It's different. If they say, look, we've got enough issues in South Africa, we're like the rape capital of the world, we need to focus internally, well and good. But then if you focus externally as well, then it's purely hypocritical to keep quiet about Israel and what happened to Jewish women and men and girls, and to yet call out other international conflicts where this kind of violence is used against women. So we're in a bad place in our country. We don't have support.
And can I presume from the African National Congress, the ruling party, that there's been silence on the sexual abuse of women?
Yeah.
That's putting it mildly. I mean, silence would be one thing. I mean, they have the added crown of being violently outspoken on the pro-Palestinian side of things. So yeah, we wouldn't even, the ANC Women's League, it's a very powerful organization, have, yes, been involved on an international stage, and not spoken out about Hamas. So they are a branch of that bigger organization of the ANC. So we can see that the attitude is skewed so strongly against Israel. There's no one there to even talk to. We try.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to ask Melanie and the Koleinu team to turn off your microphones, turn off your cameras. We're going to be back with you a little later this evening. The time has just gone 7 p.m. in South Africa, 8 p.m. Israel time, and a huge welcome to Nitsana, who's joining us this evening from Tel Aviv. Nitsana, this is our 170th broadcast that the South African Jewish Report has done since the start of COVID. Melanie, I'm just stopping your video. This is our 170th broadcast. We've now been watched more than 5 million times around the world by people who've watched all of our broadcasts, which we began as a one single Let's Help You Through COVID broadcast some 4 years ago. But of course, tonight is a very significant milestone as well. Tonight is the 7th of July, and it marks 9 months exactly since the massive Hamas invasion of Israel on the 7th of October last year that resulted in the death of more than 1,200 mainly civilians on that day, resulted in massive war crimes. And we're so delighted this evening to be hosting together with us someone who looks to bring justice to the victims. And we've got a lot to talk about, but just before that, on controls this evening is Dylan. Dylan, a big welcome. Thank you very much for being on control this evening. Just a reminder to everyone, if you're watching us on Zoom, if you're watching us on Facebook, on Instagram, or on YouTube, you can leave any comment and Dylan will bring those comments across. And we very much want a discussion this evening. It's not just Nitsana and myself, it's very much you as well. So if you have any questions or comments, please post them on whatever platform you're watching on, and Dylan will make sure that those questions and comments are brought to this forum as well. Also a reminder, if you're watching us on YouTube, please click like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. We found that so few people who watch us on a regular basis never actually subscribe to the channel. So we'd be enormously grateful if you just press the like and subscribe. That just allows us to be able to communicate with you just slightly better and easier when we have new content to share with you. But Dylan, the Jewish Report is out this week. It's a fantastic edition. Let's just see what's the headlines of the Jewish Report. I particularly like it, not just because I think I've written a great article on South Africa's elections and the government of national unity, but we've also got an amazing article on the French elections and the rise of the extreme right within France, as well as we have a report on the British elections as well. And we've got Jack Lubner, who is a Labour activist, writing and explaining his position and why he became a Labour Jewish activist within the British Labour Party. It's an edition you really cannot miss. It also deals with whether South African anti-Semitism is in line with the rest of the world or not. Go pick up your hard copy of the Jewish Report. There are about 11,500 hard copies read by about 33,000 people around the country. You can pick one up at your local butchery, at your school, at Pick and Pay, at Discam, at Discovery. You can pick one up at Kosher World, or your Spaza shop, or your garage shop, in the exclusive books at CNA. We're all over the place in about 240 locations around the country, obviously free of charge. Go pick up your edition, and don't forget as well that you should subscribe for our mailing list. We have about 36,000 people who receive the Jewish Report via email each week, and about 100,000 people who come onto our website on www.sajr.co.za, where you can either download the full edition or look at each of the individual articles as well. And if you want to watch any of our past webinars, any of the 170 webinars that we've previously run, you can either go onto our website, click webinars, or alternatively, you can find us on YouTube under the SA Jewish Report channel. And the last piece of really exciting information that we want to talk to you about is the fact that nominations are open for Jewish Achiever Awards. This is the 25th year that we'll be running the Jewish Achiever Awards, the APSA Jewish Achiever Awards, and we want to pay homage to the remarkable winners, hundreds and hundreds of winners of remarkable South African Jews that we've recognized over the past 25 years. And you'll see we're launching this week, and everyone in South Africa will know the picture in our first advert, our launch advert, and we'll be highlighting so many of our winners over the past year. But obviously, one of our first ever winners in 2000 or 1999. Brian Joffe, Entrepreneur Winner Award, one of the greatest entrepreneurs that South Africa has ever seen. And he also won the Lexus Lifetime Achiever Award at that time. But you can nominate. Each year we have about 700 or 800 nominations. You can nominate, and you can do so by clicking on a bit.ly link, JA 2024 NOM. You'll see it on your screen in front of you. Dylan will also post it into the chat section as well on Zoom, on Facebook and YouTube. Don't forget, go to click a like and subscribe on YouTube as well. Dylan, thank you very much. We'll see you a little later this evening. And Nitsana, Shurat Ha Din has a very special place in many of our hearts. You command an army of lawyers around the world who bring justice to the victims. How did it all begin?
We started actually as private lawyers in the beginning of the second Intifada in the year of 2000. We all have been through the first Intifada. We knew what's going to happen. Buses would blow up, and knife attacks and ambushes and terrorism everywhere, people getting killed on a daily basis. We just finished law school. I went to Bar-Ilan University. My friends went to Hebrew University, Tel Aviv University, and we decided that this time we are taking a role in the war against the terrorism by doing what lawyers do best, go after the pocketbooks of the terror organizations. And we started bringing lawsuits against Hamas, Islamic Jihad, PLO, the Palestinian Authority, and against Syria, Iran, and the United States. And within 2 years, we started winning in courts. We received judgments for hundreds of millions of dollars and unprecedented decisions seizing assets that belong to terrorism, to the extent that we were approached by a secret unit in the Mossad called Harpoon. It was headed by the legendary head of the Mossad, Meir Dagan, that realized that money is the oxygen to terrorism. And if you want to choke off the flow of the terrorism, you have to choke off the flow of the money. So he created this unit that its only goal was to fight terror financing. It was a secret unit until we wrote a book about it called Harpoon. And then they told us perhaps they can collaborate with us. We will take all the evidence, all the documentation that they conquered during their operations and utilize it in the courts proceeding around the world. Extend our activity to bring more lawsuits, to make it like a real war against terror financing. We agreed, but we couldn't do it as private lawyers anymore. And we established Shurat Ha Din, Israel Law Center, a non-for-profit organization that will take all these hundreds of cases, raise the funds for them, and file them in orderly manner in the courts around. And this is what we're doing since then.
It sounds really easy, but it can't be so easy. Let us say I want to go after Iran, one of the greatest promoters of terrorism in the world. How do I go after Iran? You obviously can't go to an Iranian court. Explain to us the process of holding a country like Iran to justice.
Right. So in the United States, there is a special legislation. It's an exception for the Foreign Sovereign Immunity Act. Congress decided that a state that is supporting terrorism is no longer acting as a sovereign state and therefore should not enjoy sovereign immunity. Therefore, you can bring a lawsuit against states that sponsor terrorism in the United States if you're an American citizen that were killed or injured abroad. So American citizens can bring their cases in the United States against Iran because Iran is on the waters of the State Department. Court has jurisdiction. The court hears the case. We don't care if Iran comes to court or not, as long as we can prove that Iran was standing behind the organization that committed and perpetrated the attack, like Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah. There are plenty of organizations that Iran supports. And we prove damages and we receive a judgment. Once we receive a judgment, we don't have to wait for Iran to come and pay. Obviously, she will not. But Iran has assets. They have bank accounts in the United States. They have buildings on their names. They have deals that they are involved with. And we are able to enforce our judgment against these assets. We found a bank account with $40 million. We executed it in favor of our victims. We found houses like our building, major building in New York called 655th Avenue, partially owned by the Iranian government. It's worth $700 million. Now it's being sold after we put a lien on it, and the process will go to the terror victims. We, when Iran signed a deal with Boeing to purchase 80 aircraft for $17 billion, we went to the court in Chicago, where Boeing has its headquarters, and we filed a motion for a lien on the deal. We said, we have a judgment against Iran. We are entitled to the Iranian money that will go in this deal, or to the aircrafts. And indeed, we're able to seize hundreds of millions of dollars of assets that belong to the Iranian regime and give it to the terror.
How do you serve a summons on a member of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard or the Iranian government? How do you actually do that?
You do it through diplomatic steps. Yeah, according to the US law, every time you want to serve a state has to be done diplomatically, meaning the State Department has to find a way to get these documents to the Iranian Foreign Ministry. And they do it. They do it through Switzerland. They do it through neutralized countries that have relationship with both. Sometimes you can skip that and just send it by package, by DHL or FedEx. So there are ways to serve Iran, and Iran receives the notice, and then they have a choice whether to come to court or not. I can tell you that when you bring the lawsuit, they don't come to court. But once you issue a lien, or you seize their assets, or you threaten them with taking money away from them, they will show up. They will send lawyers to court, and they fight. And luckily, most of the times they.
So tell us one or two stories. Tell us who you've brought cases against, and take us through a journey on some of the successes you've had.
Perhaps I will take the Palestinian Authority, because with banks, it's pretty easy. When you file a lawsuit against a bank, the bank provided financial services to designated organization, the bank comes to court, right? No bank will go into a default. And lawyers, they litigate the case, they fight. But when they see that ultimately they're going to lose, they are selling the cases out of court. And they pay the victims a lot of money, billions of dollars. No bank wants a judgment against them for aiding and abetting terrorism. And the success is that you change the way the banks are doing businesses, because this lawsuit sent a shockwave through the international banking system that no bank wants anymore to be involved with the terror organization. So no bank opened a bank account to a terror organization, no bank provided financial services to Islamic charity that identified the terror organization, and no bank agrees to operate in terror zones like South Lebanon or Gaza, because they are terror lands. But I think that the greatest achievement that we had was actually against the Palestinian Authority, because in some cases we received money and gave it to the terror victims, in some cases we not, but the Palestinian Authority all the time had to pay a huge price for support terrorism. We'll start with a case in Israel. In 2000, we filed a bunch of cases against the Palestinian Authority. for the horrific terror attacks that they were responsible for during the Second Intifada, beginning with the 2 soldiers that were lynched in the Palestinian police station in Ramallah on October 2000. I don't know if you remember the videos of
the ones with the red hands.
Yeah, 100%. And the red hands and the Palestinian policeman dropping one of the soldiers from the window into the crowd, and the crowd tear the body apart, took out the internal organs of the body and dragged it to the center of town and lit it on fire. Everybody watched it, and we thought that this is a cut and clear case against the Palestinian Authority. And we filed this lawsuit and won just now. Yes, it took 20 years. This is how the courts in Israel manage these cases. They were very careful, didn't want to seem political, gave the Palestinian Authority opportunity to raise any allegation they had, any argument they had, but eventually the Palestinian lost, and we received a judgment against them for 130 million shekels. The way to collect this judgment, since the Palestinian Authority does not come voluntarily and pay, is to put a lien on the Palestinian Authority's money in the treasury in Israel, the tax money that Israel collects for the Palestinian Authority and gives it to them every single month. We put a lien, and after we put a lien, we ask the court to issue an order to execute the lien and to give the 130 million shekels to the victims. Now, the law in Israel allows the treasury in Israel to deduct any debt of the Palestinian Authority from this tax money. If the Palestinian Authority owes money to the electric company in Israel, the treasury can take and deduct it and give it to the electric company. Debt to Hadassah Hospital, this is what the treasury does. Make an offset, give the money to Hadassah Hospital. So we came and say we have a final judgment, deduct this judgment from the tax money and give it to the terror victims. But the Minister of Treasury, that was Avigdor Lieberman at the time, refused. He said, according to the Defense Ministry opinion, I should not pay this money because it may collapse the Palestinian Authority. One day I go on a flight to New York, and next to me is sitting the Defense Minister, Benny Gantz. And I come to him and say, Benny, we have a problem. We have a problem because we won a judgment against the Palestinian Authority for 130 million shekels that you refuse to let the treasury pay it. And it's not really fair because you asked the terror victims to bring these cases. Remember, Harpoon, Meir Dagan, the Mossad, all this war against terror financing, you encourage the victims to go into this war. And the Palestinian Authority had an opportunity to litigate this case. They litigated it for 20 years and lost. And now we have a final judgment against them. And you refuse to pay. And Benny Gantz says to me, Nitsana, you're right, but it's complicated. So why it's complicated? You're afraid the Palestinian Authority will go bankrupt because of 130 million shekels? Their budget is 10 billion shekels. Not going to destroy them. And out of this budget, they pay the prisoners, their terrorists who sit in the Israeli jail, 1.2 billion shekels. The pay for slay policy. So paying 130 million shekels to their victims will collapse them. Besides, I'm willing to do it in payments. And Benny Gantz looks at me and says, Nitsana, you're right, but it's complicated. And then he suggested that after we come back from New York, we'll sit down and try to solve this matter. I didn't have to wait too long because this government fell, a new government got on. The new treasury was Bezalel Smotrich, and the first thing he did when he came to office was to pay this 130 million shekels to the terrorists.
Amazing. Tell me, you've also brought cases against North Korea. Why North Korea, and how did that work?
Well, North Korea, believe it or not, is deeply involved with the Middle East conflict. You wouldn't even imagine why, what their interests, but apparently the North Korea hates the West the same way Iran hates it, and the Palestinians hate it. So back then in 1972, there was an horrific terror attack in our airport in Israel. It was called Ben Gurion Airport back then. It was done by the Japanese Red Army, a terror organization from Japan that decided to help the PLO to carry out an attack at our airport. Actually wanted to hijack an Israeli plane, but when they saw the security that was very tight with El Al, they decided to go and do another plan and to carry out a terror attack at the airport. So they took an Air France flight to Israel, and when they arrived to the arrival halls and waiting for the bags to come on the carousel, once their bags arrived, they opened them up and pulled out hand grenades and guns and started shooting towards all the people in the crowd. They killed 28 people. 17 of them were Puerto Rican pilgrims that came to visit the Holy Land. Christians who stayed their entire life to come and visit Israel. So we found out that the country that trained the Japanese Red Army gave them money, gave them shelter, gave them safe haven, gave them training was North Korea. So we filed a lawsuit against North Korea in the one, and we won a judgment for $378 million. And then we saw that North Korea was helping Hezbollah to build their underground tunnels where Hezbollah was shooting missiles towards Israel in the Second Lebanese War. So we filed a lawsuit against North Korea on behalf of victims from the war. There were Druze and Arabs and Christians and Jews, 40 victims, and we won a judgment against North Korea on their behalf. So North Korea is helping Iran, is helping Hezbollah, and now in the war was helping Hamas. A lot of rockets were that were shot into Israel were manufactured in North Korea.
So Nitsana, maybe a sensitive question, but for the victims and the families of the victims, it's never about money. No amount of money ever brings back someone that you love and that you've lost. But the principle is really important for the state. So when you go to the families of the victims of terror and say, we want to do this, how do they generally react to you?
Most of them want to take away the money from the terrorists, from those who devastated their life, in order to prevent them from using it for the next step. They see it as a war. Some of them see it as blood money and don't want to go into this whole thing, feeling that they have no right to sue on behalf of the victim. But for those people, a lot of times they come and say, you take the money away from the evil, and you can use the money to memorize your son, your child, do good things with it. Just don't keep it in the hands of the terrorists. So I've never had a refusal from a victim to join this war. And unfortunately, these are the only players in this war, because Shurat Ha Din as an organization cannot sue a terror organization. We have to prove a damage, and Shurat Ha Din was not hurt, was not harmed. It's only the victims And the victims are very, very brave to go into this, might be 20 years long process, and stick to it and stay with it until the end, until we win. It's very heroic on their part. And a lot of times when we have a conflict between, sometimes different interests coming from the state, and although we work with the intelligence divisions in Israel, and we receive information and we provide information, and there is some type of collaboration, sometimes the interest of the Israeli government changes. But we have to stick with the clients, with the victims, and carry these cases until the end. And I can tell you, for instance, there was time that we are asked to file a lawsuit against the Bank of China, which was a major bank that had accounts for terrorists of Hamas. And at the time when the Harpoon tried to convince the Central Bank of China that Bank of China is holding accounts for Hamas terrorists and they should shut down the accounts, Central Bank of China said that Hamas is not a designated organization in China, and therefore there is no violation of the Chinese law, and they are not going to shut down the account. And so we were asked by Harpoon to file this lawsuit against the Bank of China, and we had to convince 150 victims to file this lawsuit, major lawsuit in the federal court in New York. And we were promised that we will get the evidence and we will get the witnesses to testify, which are all former Mossad agents, those soldiers that fought in Harpoon. But when time came to present these witnesses, something happened. Apparently, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went to China. It was the first time that Prime Minister in Israel visited China. And when he came back, he said, I don't allow this testimony to go forward. So now you have a dilemma, because Israel doesn't want you to continue with the case, but you have victims that you represent for 6 years in a federal court in New York. You don't shut down the case like this. Eventually, the dilemma was solved, and everybody was happy, but showing you that sometimes there are conflicts. This is, by the way, the reason that the government of Israel doesn't do these cases, because the interest of any government, sometimes the Palestinian Authority is your bitter enemy. Sometimes it's your partner for peace. Sometimes several countries like Qatar is your friend and tries to assist Hamas. And sometimes they are the only one that can pressure Hamas to release the hostages, and they refuse to do so. So this interest change, our interest, the victims' interest, to continue and fight until the end to bankrupt the terror organizations, never change.
So before we come on to talk about the 7th of October and what's happened in the aftermath, how successful has Shurat Ha Din actually been, the Israel Law Center? How many cases have you won? How much money have you been able to remove out of terrorists' hands?
We're able to collect billions of dollars on behalf of the victims. Iran, as I said, doesn't pay the judgment, but we enforce it against Iranian assets. The Palestinian Authority doesn't pay these judgments, and we enforce it against the tax money. In the beginning, by the way, they did compromise, they did settle the cases, now they don't, but we seize the money from the treasury and get compensations for the victims. Banks are settling these cases out of court and pay billions of dollars to the victims. So we have been very, very successful. But the impact of this lawsuit, this is what's most important, in my eyes at least, because you really hit the terrorists when it hurts the most, even if you don't receive the money. I'll just give you a very brief example. In 2004, we filed a lawsuit against the Palestinian Authority on behalf of 10 families. One of them was Jonathan Bauer. He was 7 years old. He was walking in Jaffa City in Jerusalem with his father coming back from a doctor appointment, where just in front of them was a very tall, wide-shouldered guy walking in front of them, towards them, and then the guy didn't know that he was a Palestinian policeman. They didn't even see that he was wearing explosive vest. And then the guy looked at Jonathan's eyes and blew himself up. Jonathan fell on the floor. He lost his conscience. He was rushed to Shaarei Tzedek Hospital in Jerusalem. For 4 days, the doctors had many operations of them trying to take out all the bolts and nuts and pins and screws that went into his arm and his leg. In the end, after 4 days, the doctors woke him up. They told his parents that there is one less screw remain in his brain that they are too afraid to take out. So today, Jonathan talks. He doesn't talk like we do. He walks. He doesn't walk like we do. He's disabled for life. These were thousands of attacks perpetrated by Palestinian policemen, Palestinian employees, Palestinian people that received instruction and salary from the Palestinian Authority. So although we had a lot of cases going on in Israel, I wanted to have a federal court judgment, not an Israeli one, declaring who's responsible for the intifada, who's directed this bloodshed in Israel. So we went and filed this lawsuit in New York, and for 11 years, the Palestinian Authority litigated this case, hired a law firm from Washington, D.C., and filed all motion to dismiss anything, discovery, deposition. Eventually, the case went to trial. It was a jury trial. It opened in January 2015 in New York, and the Palestinian Authority had a defense. They said, indeed, they were our employees, but they were rogue employees that did the attacks after work hours. It wasn't our policy to kill Israelis. We weren't in favor of killing Jews. But when the trial opened, they found it hard to explain to the jury, if they were rogue employees, how do you keep paying their salary until today? How you pay them money when they're sitting in the Israeli jail? How do you pay stipends to the families of the suicide bombers? How do you call town squares and streets on the names of the terrorists and the suicide bombers? This is not how you treat rogue employees. This is not what your policy is against killing Jews. There was no surprise when the trial ended. The jury came back and found the Palestinian Authority responsible for all 24 acts of terrorism and gave us a judgment against them for $655 million. The Palestinian Authority was in shock. They filed an appeal. In the United States, when you want to file an appeal, you have to post a bond for the entire amount of the judgment. Palestinian Authority say that they don't have $655 million to post in the court. So they reached out to the State Department for help, and the State Department, after Obama administration, helped. They came to court. They said the Palestinian Authority is a national security asset of the United States in the Middle East. They wanted to keep existing to the side of the State of Israel. They don't want it to go bankrupt. They asked the court to be considerate. And the court was. Instead of $655 million, the court ordered $10 million bond. And then the way was open to the Palestinian Authority to come and argue its appeal. And they had one argument, just one technical argument, personal jurisdiction. They said the Palestinian Authority is not present in the United States. They don't have any ties to the United States. They don't run businesses. They don't have representatives in the United States. There is no personal jurisdiction. And the Court of Appeal had a dilemma because on one hand, we filed this case based on the Anti-Terrorism Act, a law that allows American citizens that were killed or injured abroad to bring their cases in the United States against extraterritorial organizations. It's an extraterritorial law. On the other hand, there was the American Constitution. due process, personal jurisdiction. But having in front of them what the State Department said, that no matter what you rule against the Palestinian Authority, they don't have the money to pay, the Court of Appeal went and vacated the judgment. We didn't stop. We went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, knowing that there is a new Pharaoh that didn't know Joseph, now there is Trump administration, approached the State Department and asked for its opinion. But the State Department came back and said, no, personal jurisdiction. This law is unconstitutional. It has to be vacated, and the judgment should be vacated as well. And we lost the writ in the Supreme Court. But we didn't stop. We never stopped. We went to Congress and told Congress that there is a problem because we litigated this case now for 15 years based on the law that they legislated, the Anti-Terrorism Act. That was a very well-intended law, but now was canceled by the court for being unconstitutional. And they have to fix this problem. And the way to fix this problem is to come and reinstate the personal jurisdiction, to come and say that if the Palestinian Authority wants to keep receiving aid from the United States government, they have to agree to personal jurisdiction. And Congress changed the law. President Trump signed on the law, and the Palestinian Authority came and said that they don't want any more aid from the United States government. That lasts only 1 year, because after 1 year, they came back and needed this help, $600 million that Palestinians need. And therefore, we are back in court to see whether this conduct of the Palestinian Authority reinstates personal jurisdiction and reinstates our judgment. Perhaps we'll be able to win. It will go all the way to the Supreme Court. I know that for sure. And perhaps we will get the Palestinian Authority to pay $655 million to the Turks. But until then, I know, I'm told by the security services in Israel that the Palestinian Authority's leaders could not believe how the little support they gave the terrorists before the attack, how the little money they paid them after the attack turned in the end of the day to hundreds of millions of dollars in judgment against them. This is what these cases do. They hurt the terror organizations. They teach them a lesson. This is the only way to dismantle a terror organization. Even now in Gaza, you can kill the terrorists. You can destroy the tunnels. You can take away their weapon and blowing all up. If you don't drive their source of money, they will come back. Hamas as an idea is on, and they will come back. There is Hamas in Judea and Syria. There is Hamas abroad in Turkey, in Qatar. They will come back and re-establish themselves. But if you cut off their source of money, if you choke off their oxygen, there will be no rehabilitation. That will be the end of Hamas.
So let's talk about the 7th of October. Who can one bring cases to over what happened on the 7th of October? Is the United Nations in your crosshairs? Is the Red Cross in your crosshairs? And what do we do with the surge of anti-Semitism and support for Hamas that we've seen on university campuses in the United States? And while you answer that question, I'm going to ask Dylan as well, just to post the contact details, the website for Shurat Ha Din, because there may be many people watching us who want to learn more about your work and also want to be able to make a donation for the unbelievable work that you do to support the cases that you bring around the world. So I'm going to ask Dylan to post in the chat on YouTube, on Zoom, on Facebook, and on Instagram the details for Shurat Ha Din, the Israeli Law Center, so people are able to, in fact, assist you in the holy mission that you have.
Thank you very much. It will be very, very helpful. Shurat Ha Din is a non-for-profit, and it's solely based on donations. We need any support we can get on behalf of the victims, on behalf of our war to the side of the IDF to dismantle Hamas. And indeed, after October 7th, we immediately jumped into the war. We represent hundreds of terror victims from the massacre including soldiers, in lawsuits against everyone that financed Hamas. The Palestinian Authority that gives $1 billion a year to Hamas. $1 billion. Imagine that. This is money that goes to pay for the electricity, for the water, for the oil in Gaza, for the health system, for the education system in Gaza. And Hamas, that is the governed entity in Gaza, is the one who's supposed to pay for all this. He collects the money from the taxpayers in Gaza. If somebody else paid for it, Hamas has free $1 billion to divert to its military operations. And this is how they were able to build their underground tunnels, the city. 7 floors of tunnels, 750 kilometers long. You can drive a truck inside them. And this is how they brought into Gaza missiles and ammunition and rockets and launchers. $1 billion a year. In addition, we file lawsuits against the Qatari charities that fund the charities of Hamas in Gaza. They give them hundreds of millions of dollars. There is no difference between the benevolent wing to the military wing. They're all one major organization. Hamas could not exist without its charities that support the population, that creates jobs for the people in Gaza, that will allow Hamas to use them ultimately as human shields, to use their hospitals, their kindergarten, their schools. So they have to pay these Qatari charities, and mainly they have to stop funding Hamas. We go after the cryptocurrency companies. Hamas, the day after the war started, launched a crowdsourcing campaign on their social media saying, please help us to fight against the Zionists, donate to our cause, and provided with a cryptocurrency wallet. They said, don't donate dollars. We have no way to cash dollars, but please donate with cryptocurrency. So we go and sue the cryptocurrency companies that these wallets are traded in. And Binance, which is the exchange of the cryptocurrency company. But on behalf of the hostages, we went and sued the Red Cross, because the Red Cross refuses to go and fulfill its obligation to visit our hostages. The Red Cross, according to the Geneva Convention, is the only organization in the world that has the authority to go and visit the prisoners from both sides in armed conflict. He did it in Syria, in the civil war there. He did it in Russia and Ukraine. He did it in Kosovo. He does it everywhere. But when it comes to Jews, he refuses. And it's just an agenda of the Red Cross. Because back then, from the day of the Holocaust, the Red Cross already refused to go and visit the Jews in Auschwitz and the other concentration camps. He saw it as an internal German problem. Today, on their website, there is an apology saying that they regret that they didn't go and visit the Jews in the concentration camps. Perhaps it was a mistake. But I don't want to open their website in a couple of years and see an apology saying that perhaps it was a mistake not to visit the hostages that are kept in captivity in the hands of Hamas, because we all know what these hostages are going through. Their medical conditions are kept in tunnels. They're going through sexual abuse, men and women. It has to stop. The only way, the only body that can do it is the Red Cross. UNRWA, a UN organization that's supposed to take care of the rights of the refugees, those Palestinians, those Arabs that fled from Israel in the independence war in 1948. When the war started back then, when the state of Israel was created, the Arab League came to the population in Israel, the Arab population, and told them to vacate their houses because it would be harder for the Arab leagues, for the Arab nations to fight the Jews this way. They told them, go out, don't go far, just stay around, but stay there until we finish the job. We kill the Jews. You go come back to your houses. So the majority of the Arab population in Israel fled. 600,000 out of 750,000 left, but they didn't go so far. They moved to Lebanon, to Syria, to Jordan, to the West Bank, which was annexed by Jordan, and to Gaza, which was part of Egypt. But instead of having the UN agency that takes care of refugees worldwide, it's called the UN Refugees High Commissioner, the UN established a new organization, a special organization, UNRWA, UN Work and Relief Agency. And these organizations aim not to help the refugees to get and start a new page in their life. No. The refugees were not allowed to integrate in the area where they went to. They weren't allowed to get citizenship in the countries they left to. They weren't allowed to get work in these areas or to marry other people there. No, they had to stay in the refugee camps with no work, with no future, because UNRWA told them that they had to keep their status as a refugee for the day that they will be able to go back to their houses in Israel, in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, in Akko. And until this day, have to stay, and their children, and their grandchildren, and their great-great-grandchildren. So today, instead of 600,000 refugees, we have 6 million. And UNRWA teaches these people to hate Israel, to hate the Jews, because the Jews are the enemies. The Jews took their houses away from them. We all know that for years, but on October 7th, UNRWA participated in the massacre. Employees of UNRWA murdered, butchered, raped, kidnapped hostages. And during the war, UNRWA kept in their facilities missiles and launchers and rockets. And they had underground tunnels. And they had the service of Hamas in their facilities. Now, the head of UNRWA says, I didn't know. I wasn't aware of it. With all due respect, it doesn't make noise to dig a tunnel underneath your headquarters, underneath your office. You don't see piles of rockets in the room next door? No? So we sued UNRWA. Sued UNRWA on behalf of the victims. We sued the State Department. We filed an injunction against the State Department to defund UNRWA, because the United States is the largest funder of UNRWA. They gave $4 billion to UNRWA so far, $422 million only last year. If United States will stop funding UNRWA, UNRWA will be dismantled. And this is the goal. UNRWA has to disappear. Not only for our future, for the future of the Palestinian Gaza. You want to start a new day, the day after, we call it. What will happen after the IDF will conquer the Gaza Strip? Who will control the Hamas? How can we re-educate them? How can we do denazification to these people? Not with UNRWA. Not with UNRWA. With a fresh, new organization. And there is an organization, the UN High Commissioner of Refugees. They will come and take over. And we went to the International Criminal Court. We filed indictments against the Hamas terrorists, but not for the murder that they committed on October 7th, and not for the mutilating, and not for the beheading, and not for burning babies alive, but for the acts of rape. This violent, unprecedented acts of rape. They nailed women to the trees. They group raped them. They butchered them while they're raping them. They cut their head off, they burned them. We brought to Israel a mission of women from Kosovo, from the Kosovo War, that were raped itself, but were able to speak about it. And they said that they investigated all the armed conflicts in the past 30 years because the use of rape as weapon of war is a known phenomenon. Everybody does it. Boko Haram does it. In the Syrian civil war, it happened. In the Kosovo Serbian war, it happened. In Ukraine, it happens. Hamas did. Unprecedented. The way they were doing it, the violence, the atrocity they committed along with the rape, never happened before. And the terrorists, the Nukba terrorists, and everybody else had instructions. They came with written instruction to rape. It was part of the orders that they received. They told them, you have to murder, you have to burn, you have to butcher. They came with lightning influence, fluids and fire equipment, and you have to rape. And this is a war crime. And yet the world is silent about it. So no, the world cannot keep silent anymore. The world that does conferences and condemnations after acts of rape everywhere, silent when it comes to Jews. And lastly, your question about anti-Semitism. We Israelis thought that after October 7th, the world will be with us. They will realize what the monsters of Hamas committed to our people, to our babies, to our children, to our women and men. And we were right for one day. Already on October 8th, there were mass demonstrations against Israel, pro-Palestinian demonstrations, pro-Hamas demonstrations, calling the campuses in the Ivy League universities in the United States, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Against the Jews, genocide to the Jews. And when the presidents of this Ivy League university, of Harvard University, Penn University, MIT, were called to a hearing before Congress, and they were asked if it's okay to call from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, when the meaning of the word of this phrase is genocide against the Jews, this president said, it depends on the context. Well, no, it doesn't depend on the context. Because if there were students that were calling to genocide against Blacks or against Chinese, they were thrown out of the university right on the spot. When it comes to Jews, it depends on the context? No way. So we filed a lawsuit against Harvard University on behalf of alumni of Harvard University that say that from this ridiculous way Harvard University treated this escalating anti-Semitism, for turning a blind eye, for actually encouraging it and not doing anything, and this stupid hearing that they had in Congress, they actually devaluate their diploma, because now companies don't want to hire people from Harvard. They don't want to hire graduates from Harvard. And we showed letters of hedge funds companies, of law firms, that said to Harvard University, we don't want your graduates in our firms. So this is the lawsuit we filed in Massachusetts against Harvard University. And lastly, we had to file a lawsuit against this anti-Semitic organization, this student organization that flames and burns this entire anti-Semitism protest in the campuses. Students for Justice in Palestine. This is an organization that takes over the campuses and convince all the students there to go and hurt the Jews, the Jewish students, to make their life miserable, to influence the young students that are involved. They don't know anything. They are ignorant about the conflict, to hate Israel, to hate the Jews. And we came and proved on a a 180 long page brief of the complaints, how SJP is actually a student arm of Hamas, how they actually an alter ego of a designated organization, the Holy Land Foundation, that was indicted by the United States law enforcement and changed its name. They closed down the Holy Land Foundation. They opened a new organization called American Muslim from Palestine. But these are the same people, the same infrastructure, the same offices, the same building, just different name. And these organizations came and built up Students for Justice in Palestine. And today, in the war, every organization needs a propaganda office, something that will spread their ideology, that will recruit militants, that will recruit the support, that will influence the public opinion. And this is exactly what Students for Justice in Palestine does. And therefore, according to the Anti-Terrorism Act in the United States, is not allowed to provide any sort of services to Hamas. He's not allowed to aid and abet Hamas, a designated organization. And if he does so, he's responsible for the damages that Hamas is in charge for. The massacre on October 7th. So we
What about the social media companies? Can one hold Facebook, TikTok responsible for the promotion of terror?
So we have lawsuits against these social media groups as well. We started in 2015, in the beginning of the 9th Intifada, trying to come and show that actually words and incitement cause terrorism, and this escalating terrorism is due to videos that teach how to kill and encourage to kill and gives rights to terrorists. Unfortunately, in the United States, the social media platforms are immune. There is a law called Communication Decency Act, and Section 230 of this law grants blanket immunity to social media servers. They just don't see them as publishers. Congress said that it was in the beginning of the days of the internet, in 1996, when Congress wanted to keep the internet open and to let it flourish. And it came and said, companies of social media cannot be like a newspaper that can read the articles before they go into print, or like a TV that can stream the videos before they go on air. Social media companies, they have billions of users, they have no control. So all our cases that we filed against Twitter, against Facebook, against Google were dismissed because of this Section 230. And then we said, terrorism is not an Israeli problem. It's a global problem. Look at Daesh, look at Boko Haram. So let's go and file lawsuits on behalf of ISIS victims. We went and represented a young student, Naomi Gonzalez, 24 years old student from LA, that received a scholarship to study a semester abroad in Paris. And she was sitting in Paris in a cafe where ISIS carried out the attack in the concert of Death Metal Angels and killed 130 people. She was the only American that was killed. And we went and filed a lawsuit on her family's behalf against Google, because Google owns YouTube. And YouTube allowed ISIS to stream these beheading videos. Do you remember these videos, Howard? Do you remember the
orange
prisoners,
uniforms, the beheadings, of course.
Terrible, horrific videos of orange suits, the prisoners, and they're beheading one after one after one, and then something put them in a cage and burn them alive, put them in a cage and drown them in the ocean. But in the end of each video, there was a content information calling people to come and join ISIS. Can you imagine that? And people really in Austria, in Switzerland, in Brussels, in Paris, knew to take a plane to go to Turkey, to cross the border to Iraq and Syria and join ISIS over there, and then bring the knowledge that they acquired and carry out attacks in Brussels, in Paris, and Istanbul. But when we filed this lawsuit, we lost. Section 230. We filed an appeal, we lost the appeal, but when we went to the Supreme Court for the first time, the Supreme Court agreed to issue a writ. Supreme Court of the United States came and said that they had a hearing. Usually a hearing in the Supreme Court takes 1 hour, 20 minutes to the plaintiffs, 20 minutes to the defendants, and 10 minutes each for rebuttal. And this time the hearing took 3 hours. The judges, 9 of them, were sitting on the bench and debating what to do. Because on one hand, it's not okay to give the platforms immunity, because today, social media companies are based on knowledge. First of all, they censor content, they delete pages, they deny you from access to your page based on content. They punish you, they give penalty. And second, they promote content. They base their whole business model on promotions, on recommendations. They make billions of dollars based on content. So how can they be immune from? On the other hand, if you change Section 230, if you strip the social media companies from their immunity, you open the gate to a flood of lawsuits against the social media companies, not only against them, against any company that is based on content, on recommendation. They might collapse the American economy. So the judges had a problem, had a big dilemma. And in the end, they told us, look, perhaps we are not the 9 best experts of the internet. But in their decision, they did not dismiss the case. They allowed us to prove liability. They allowed us to continue with the case and show that Google is really responsible for the damages that ISIS committed against the terror victims. This is a huge victory, and the fight against the social media companies is still going on.
Nitsana, in our last remaining few moments, I want to do a few things. The one is I want Dylan to be able to post your link again so people can come follow the work that Shurat Ha Din does and make a donation if they're able to do so. So Dylan, if I can ask you across all of our platforms to please post the link again. The second thing is I'm going to ask everyone who's watching us just to leave you a comment, because we're going to end with you in the next few moments, and we'd love the opportunity for people who've really seen the way you can use law and justice to deliver such remarkable a benefit to the victim. So we'd love them to be able to leave a comment for you there as well. But the last thing I want to deal with is South Africa, because quite recently Shurat Ha Din wrote to the American government and suggested that using the Magnitsky Act, and most of our viewers know the Magnitsky Act because we've had Bill Browder on our program on a number of occasions. They know that using the Magnitsky Act, you can in fact freeze the assets of people around the world, people involved in corruption, people involved in terrorism. But Shurat Ha Din and a group of over 100 lawyers wrote to the American government and asked for an investigation into Cyril Ramaphosa, his personal fortunes, his assets, and many of the top leadership of the African National Congress. Tell us about that. What is your approach? And do you think that in a country where our president has himself stood up and chanted from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, what recourse do we as the people of South Africa have against an unconscionable government?
Well, I think we all know the coincidence of the ANC going almost into bankrupt and suddenly getting out of it with the financial support of Iran. The Foreign Ministry of South Africa went to Iran, and in return to Iran helping the ANC not to go bankrupt, South Africa went and served as the legal arm of Hamas, proxy of Iran, in the International Court of Justice, and filed a lawsuit against Israel for committing genocide. Now, just one word about this proceeding, because we seem to disregard these international tribunals. Oh, the ICC in The Hague, yes, the International Court of Justice. Who cares about these institutions? If these courts issue arrest warrants against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant, it will not end with them. It will continue to soldiers. And even if they do just against them, this colors Israel as a war criminal. And as such, Israel will be alienated. It will be sanctioned. It will be boycotted by a lot of countries that are members in the International Criminal Court. And with the International Court of Justice, if God forbid they will issue a ruling that Israel committing genocide in Gaza, Israel will not be able to continue with the war. And they already issued temporary orders, temporary restraints orders.
Provisional measures.
Israel. That's terrible. And Israel, as a democratic state, supposed to honor the international law and supposed to honor any ruling of these courts. And if Israel even does not want to do it, the rest of the world will do it because they are all members in this court. So these are very dangerous proceedings against Israel. And if the court will grant South Africa's petition, it will be a game changer. This is why it's so harsh and so bad for South Africa to serve as a legal arm of Hamas. And if they did it due to a corruption, then the United States has to step in because the United States cannot fund, is not allowed to fund any country or any party that engaged with corruption. This is a Magnitsky Act. So we demanded that the State Department will run an investigation to see what were the circumstances that brought the ANC and your Prime Minister and to file this lawsuit against Israel. For our understanding, it was Iran that bribed them to. And I hope that the State Department will dig in and will carry this investigation. We're putting a lot of pressure on senators to go and bother the State Department not to let this case just go away. And in South Africa, all we can hope for is that the ANC will not be in power anymore, because as long as they're there, they are very, very dangerous to the state of Israel. And I think they're dangerous to South Africa as well, but this is, problem of your country. Israel, just to sum up, needs the support of its ally, needs friends. And I think the people in South Africa are very friendly to Israel. The Jewish community, obviously, is huge supporters of the state of Israel. And please continue to be so. We need any ally we can have. We need all the support we can garner. We need all the assistance to keep this war and to end it with a victory, to dismantle Hamas and to bring back our hostages. I must tell you that the people of Israel has been through catastrophes for all generations. In the Inquisition, we had to convert. In the pogroms, we had to run away. In the Holocaust, we couldn't even run away. But we got out of our ashes. We built a state. And now we don't convert. Now we don't run away. Now we fight. And in all our wars, we won. We're going to finish this war with a victory because Am Israel Chai.
Am Yisrael Chai. Nitsana, thank you so much for being so generous with your time this evening. But more importantly, you've become the David of your generation, fighting against the Goliaths out there. And we have so many enemies. But ultimately, we know our cause is good and just. And the fact that you can take really and harness an army of lawyers around the world to be able to assist the Jewish people is just one of the most remarkable, inspiring stories that we could ever tell. To you and to all of your colleagues at Shurat Ha Din, the Israel Law Center, a huge thank you for everything that you do. And most importantly, an enormous thank you for joining us this evening and telling us these remarkable, remarkable stories. I'm going to share all the comments with you that people have left. So I think you too will understand and appreciate just how much the people of South Africa and our viewers around the world actually just draw inspiration from you and everything that you do. Thank you so much for joining us. Good night to you. And for those people who are remaining with us this evening, what we're going to be doing is Sheryl Sandberg, the Chief Operating Officer of Facebook, a former Chief Operating Officer of Facebook, created a documentary. She went to Israel. She went to go speak to the victims of sexual violence from the 7th of October. And she produced a documentary which we think is so important for everyone around the world to see. We're going to be screening that documentary right now, and then we're going to come back with the remarkable team from Koleinu and talk about what's happened in South Africa and how for the victims of rape and sexual abuse and the victims of war, we can get justice for them in South Africa as well. So I ask you, please, if you're able to stay on for a little longer, just join us for a screening of Screams Before Silence.
A lot of the bodies were naked, totally.
We saw that some of it was sexual in nature, directly targeted sexual violence.
I heard a girl scream and ask for them to stop.
Her face was on the ground and she was raped.
He's dragging her by the hair and she's handcuffed behind her back and she looks terrified and her pants are blood-stained.
She was naked from her waist down, bruises all over her body.
כשרותה בנו, כולם היו ערומות, מישהו הפשיט אותם, מישהו התעלל בהם.
They were using sexual violence as a tool of war, of weaponizing women.
They were sent with clear instructions to rape as many, to humiliate as many.
We are ready for the unthinkable possibility of pregnancies.
פשוט הגוף שלך הוא פתוח לכלל. יכולים להעיר אותך באמצע הלילה ולאנוס אותך, וכל הזמן האקדח מכוון לראש.
That was the first thing I feared. Being raped. Being sexually assaulted.
I remember the entire time I was like thinking, okay, you knew it's gonna happen. It's really happening.
It's really difficult to talk about, but it's my calling, it's my duty to come out and talk.
You're very brave to come back.
הוא נרצח כאן, עומר חרמש, וכאן זה שכנים שלנו, שהם החזיקו את הדלת של הממ"ד מאוד מאוד חזק, וממש נאבקו איתם, והם ניצלו. המשפחה פה ניצלה עם הסבתא המבוגרת. זה הבית שלנו, גולדשטיין אלמוג. הבית שבנינו לפני 4.5 שנים, עברנו אליו. המקום הפרטי שלנו, המקום הבטוח שלנו, המקום שמאוד אהבנו.
Oh, this is horrible. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. No one should have to live through this. You okay? Yes. I'm trying to be okay. You don't have to be okay. You have to be okay. No one could be okay. Yes. התעוררנו לצבע אדום, אזעקה, כי היו טילים. ב-6:28 בבוקר, ורצנו לממ"ד, למרחב המוגן. אחותי הגדולה ים, האחים הקטנים שלי, ואבא ואמא שלי.
So when you were here, what were you thinking?
הייתי מאוד בשקט, ואז אחותי התחילה לקבל הודעות מאנשים שהיא מכירה. הם פה, הם אצלנו בבית, ירו בי, יורים בי, ופתאום הבנו, כאילו, אנשים מתים מזה, כאילו, זה אמיתי. כאילו, אמרתי, יכול להיות שזה השעות האחרונות של החיים שלנו, אז כאילו, מה, אולי נעשה משהו אחרת, ואז אהבתי את זה ישר, כי לא רציתי לחשוב ככה. וטל אמר שהוא פוחד, הוא אמר לאבא שלי, ואבא שלי אמר, גם אני פוחד, אנחנו מפחדים ביחד, וכל הזמן הוא אמר, כאילו, זה יסתיים ונצא מפה.
So tell me about what happened here.
אז אני הגעתי למסיבה עם שני חברים, עם תום ובן. הגענו ב-1 בלילה, ועד השעה 6:30 בבוקר, זאת הייתה המסיבה הכי טובה שהייתי בה בחיים שלי. פסטיבל ענק, מלא אנשים צעירים שבאו לחגוג, באו לשמוח, באו לחגוג ימי הולדת.
It was the best party. And then at 6:29, the music just shut off.
צבע אדום, צבע אדום! צבע אדום! יש רקטות באוויר, צבע אדום! להתפטר, צבע אדום!
And I tried to understand what's going on. I looked up and I saw like small drops of rockets. I could see the lines of the rockets from Gaza.
אני באותם רגעים עשיתי סיור מסביב לאירוע כזה, ואז התחילה מטח טילים. זה היה פשוט הזוי.
עצרו את המוזיקה, אמרו לכולנו לשכב על הרצפה, ידיים על הראש.
ואז התחלנו לפנות אנשים.
מאבטחים רצו אלינו וצעקו לכולם לצאת משטח המסיבה, לעלות לרכבים ולצאת החוצה.
אבל אנחנו לא רוצים למות עכשיו. למה דווקא עכשיו? אני גמורה.
אני עברתי לאזור של העצים, נו!
My mother called me and asked me what's going on. I told her that I'm in a shelter. I lied to her that I'm in a shelter.
אמא שלי מתקשרת אליי, אומרת לי שיש חדירה של מחבלים. עכשיו אני שומע אותה אומרת את זה, ואני אומר כאילו, ואני צוחק, אני אומר לה, כאילו, על מה דוברת? איזה חדרה של מחבלים. מנתק את השיחה, התחלנו לשמוע ירי מהכביש. ממש, טבח.
We heard like boop, 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 boop. It didn't stop.
זה היה כמו מטווח הברווזים, 300 איש רצים, שומעים מלא צרחות, ירי מכל כיוון.
מחבלים ועם מקלעים התחילו לרדוף אחרי האנשים. לא מעניין אותם במי, במה, איך, פשוט יורים.
אנשים נופלים.
בשלב הזה הגוף שלי בוגד בי, ואני לא מצליחה לרוץ יותר, אז אני פשוט נשכבת על הרצפה. אני כל כך בסטרס ובחרדה, שאני אומרת לתום שפשוט ימשיך לרוץ, כי הם מחבלים מאחורינו, ואני כבר לא מצליחה לרוץ.
היה שם כאילו כאוס כזה מטורף, רק מנסים לרוץ למקום שנראה לנו מוגן.
I saw my friends running to the trailer. I started to run. We still heard gunshots above our head. טוב, ממש מרים אותי מהרצפה, והחלטתי שאני רצה, גם אם זה אומר שאני מתה בדרך, אני ידע שניסיתי להציל את עצמי. אני רצה, אני מקבלת כדור לרגל, הם יורים עלינו RPG, וכל הרסיסים נכנסים לי לבטן. The booms of their rifles they're getting closer to us. We understand that we're waiting for them. It was like that. We're sitting and waiting for what will happen.
כאילו ממש ישבנו ככה על הילדים, עם הגב לכניסה של הדלת, כאילו לגונן עליהם, ככה. ואז אנחנו שומעים צעקות, אל יהוד, אל יהוד, כאילו הם כאן, הם בבית שלנו.
ואבא שלי לקח, בהחלטה האחרונה של הרגע, הוא לקח קרש מהמיטה של אחותי, והוא עמד פה בכניסה, ככה, עם הקרש. ואז הם ירו בדלת, אפשר לראות שזה גם עבר לכאן. וזהו, והם נכנסו והם ישר ירו באבא. ואני רואה אותו ככה נשימות אחרונות וידיים למעלה, וכאילו, לפני שנייה הוא ישב איתי פה, ולפני שנייה, ואז כאילו, לא נפרדתי ממנו, ולא חיבקתי אותו, נשקתי אותו, וכאילו...
הם מתחילים להוציא אותנו בשיירה, ואנחנו עוברים, כאילו נדב שוכב פה, ואנחנו סוג של עוברים ככה, כאילו מעליו, או מסביבו, ככה, כאילו מקיפים אותו, הוא שוכב פה.
הוא שוכב עם ידיים למעלה.
ואנחנו יוצאים בשיירה, בנים ראשונים.
אחר כך ים, ואז אני, ואז אמא. גל וטל יוצאים, ים באה לצאת והיא מתעלפת ונתקעת בדלת. ואני משכיבה את ים פה, ואני לוקחת מים מהכיור, ואנחנו מנסות להעיר אותה. והיא מגיבה לי קצת, היא מתעוררת, והיא מתעוררת כזה, פותחת את העיניים, ועוד פעם, והיא מתעלפת שוב, וגם זה הרגע שמישהו מהם מושך לי בשיער, ואז אני זוכרת שפשוט יצאתי. אבל קשה לי עם זה שיצאתי, וגם אמא יצאה, ואז היא חזרה והיא ראתה שים ירויה בפנים, והיא הייתה אמורה לבוא איתנו. הוציאו אותה, כאילו, היינו אמורים להיחטף כולנו גם עם ים. אבא כבר נרצח, אבל ים הייתה אמורה לבוא איתנו, והיא התעלפה, ואני מדמיינת איזושהי סיטואציה שהיא מתעלפת, ואני ואמא בחוץ, והיא פה לבד, והיא מתחילה להתעורר, והמחבל פשוט בא ויורה לה בפנים.
סיפור של שניות.
כן, לוקח לנו הרבה זמן לדבר על זה, אבל הכל קרה. ב-11:40 זאת ההודעה האחרונה של ים, וב-11:51 כבר יש סרטון שלנו באוטו, חוצים את הגדר לעזה. הסתכלתי עליו ואמרתי לאמא, הולכים לאנוס אותי עכשיו, כאילו הולכים לענות אותי, אבל היא הסתכלה עליי ולא ענתה. כאילו קיבלנו את זה, שזה הולך לקרות עכשיו, שאנחנו פה עכשיו.
there were 10 men around me. And my instinct was just to fight, to do what I can. I wanted to show them that I'm strong and that I'm not gonna go away that easily, that they're not gonna take me so easily. I'm gonna fight them. I didn't mind getting killed. I think maybe I preferred that in those moments. I was scared, I was really scared that they're gonna rape me there and that they're gonna drag me through Gaza streets and parade my body around. So I feared that more than being killed.
First thing you see is the terrorist drags Naama out, and her face looks terrified. She's barefoot and in her pajamas, and they're blood-stained.
They're grabbing her by the hair, and she's all like messed up. And
I'm thinking of her hair, and I'm like in my mind, I'm stroking her hair like I'm always doing, and
I think thinking of what she experienced, until that point, and how long was she?
Maybe that's the thing with that video. That we would like to think that this couldn't be possible. That nobody would harm a young girl. But then you just see it there. They're the one who posted that video, the Hamas.
אז במשך 7 שעות אני שוכבת שם פצועה, ואני מתחילה לקבל סרטונים שחמאס צילמו, ובעצם אני מבינה שהם לא הגיעו רק לרצוח. וככל שהזמן עובר ואף אחד בעצם לא מגיע לחלץ אותנו, אני מבינה שיש להם זמן לעשות מה שהם רוצים. Jag var ju där. Ja, det var ett där. Sorry. Wow.
Wow. That's crazy. It's crazy.
So now you're in the trailer. Can you try to describe what happens?
2 of my friends were here. One was here. We were on the ground, and my head was here. I was like that for 7 hours. My legs were banded like that. And while I was here, I could hear the screams, and after 1 hour that we were in the trailer, I started to hear yelling of women. I heard a girl that started to yell for a long time. It was like, please don't, no, stop. No. It was like she was asking someone to stop. What can they stop? Someone is abusing her, someone touching her, someone is doing something.
How do you know that? Or why do you think that?
I know how it sounds. Like, I can understand how it sounds. There's no way that women will scream that loud for so long if it's not for asking for help because someone is doing something sexually to her. So when I hear like someone scream and then silence, I knew that it's probably someone got shot. But when you hear this chaos for like 20 minutes or 15 minutes, you understand that something much worse happening right over there. And it doesn't stop. That was the time when I started to be afraid I'm going to be raped. I thought about the fact that I have a piercing in an intimate place, and I was thinking about how can I take it off as fast as possible because they probably will rip it off. And then I'm starting to calculate what is worse, to get kidnapped or to be raped or to get shot. What's worse? What's better? I heard the girls who were yelling came from this side and also from this side. It like surrounded me. There were so many noises of women, different women, not only one. I also heard a couple. She didn't say words, like she was just screaming, and he begged for someone to leave her. I remembered that he said, "Azov ota," leave her alone. The guy was crying, I heard him, and for a long time.
And how did it end? How did the screaming end in these cases?
They got shot. And then silence.
לא נושמים. אף אחד לא נושם, כאילו. מישהו עושה פיפס. זה כזה... כאילו...
What happened then?
הגיע הטנדר ונעצר 40 מטר דרומית מהשיח. מתוכו יצאו כמה מחבלים. הם תפסו שם איזה בחורה. אני זוכר שהיה כזה מין חצי מעגל סביבה. ואחד מהם כאילו אנס אותה. אני זוכר שהמכנס שלה היה למטה, כזה עד החצי, והוא מאחוריה, וכאילו זה היה כזה... אבל לא משנה, בקיצור,
So you actually saw his body moving and you knew what it was?
כן. כשרואים אונס, אז יודעים שזה אונס, כאילו זה לא... הם עשו מה שהם רוצים. הם עשו פשוט מה שהם רוצים, הם לא... לא היה חוקים. שוהם שהיה לידי, הוא אמר כזה, הוא דוקר אותה, הוא שוחט אותה, משהו כזה, ואני לא רציתי להסתכל. וכשחזרתי חזרה, כשהסתכלתי עוד פעם, היא כבר הייתה מתה, היא לא... הוא עדיין המשיך בזה. הוא אנס אותה גם אחרי שהוא שחט אותה. זאת אומרת, יכול להיות שהוא אנס אותה כשהייתה מתה.
What's going through your mind at that moment?
שהלוואי והיה לי האפשרות להציל אותה, הלוואי שהיה לי נשק. כי אם היה לי זה... הייתי מסתער עליהם ומנסה לעשות...
They, by accident.
No.
Our mission, I don't know, maybe a mission, yes.
Can you tell us what happened? Where were you the morning of October 7th?
I was at my home in Kiryat Ata at the north. something like 2.5 hours to be here, turn on the TV, and the first picture I saw that it was the tender of the Hamas terrorist in Sderot. And I said, okay, stop, you must do something. I just took my gun, I took my car, start drive to Reim.
Where did you tell your wife you were going?
I lied.
משטרה צה"ל! משטרה צה"ל! מי שמה בפנים? מי בפנים? מישהו?
ריק. I don't know why I took my phone.
משטרה צה"ל! יש פצועים! מישהו? יש לי פה הרוגים. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 הרוגים. יש לי פה שוטרת. יש לי שוטרת הרוגה פה. יש בפנים. אוי ואבוי. אוי ואבוי. יש פה מישהו עם סימן חיים. שייתן לנו סימן חיים.
If even one would raise his hand.
שום סימן חיים? מישהו, בבקשה. מישהו יכול לענות?
התקשר אליי קצין בדרום, והוא עושה ככה עם הטלפון, והוא אומר לי, אתה רואה, אני ספרתי 125, אבל התבלבלתי במספר, יש לפחות כפול. הטילו לה את המשימה לטפל בהם, ואני לא יודע מה לעשות.
אנחנו נמצאים פה בציר 232. כל הכביש הזה מלא ברכבים, חלקם שרופים וחלקם לא שרופים, אנשים ללא רוח חיים צעירים שרצחו אותם בדם קר על ידי ירי. אירוע קשה מאוד, כל מקום שאנחנו רוצים, יש גופות על הכביש, יש גופות בכל פינה, בכל מקום. הצורך שלא יתואר.
We are trained to collect hearts or even bodies in hard situations. Now, we go around the world to help. Hundreds of bodies I dealt with. I don't have words to explain what we saw.
הגעתי לאזור המסיבה, באתי לחלץ ילדים מכל מיני מיקומים. מה שראיתי שם זה לא ישכח לי בחיים. זה היה טבח נוראי. וזה ככה היה על שטח אדיר. כנראה באיזשהו שלב גם הם ברחו, רדפו אחריהם והראו להם באמצע החוץ שם.
זאת רואה שגם אחרי הכדור הראשון שהם קיבלו, מישהו עבר עליהם וריסס אותם עם עוד איזה 30 כדורים. דברים הזויים, אוזניים חתוכות, אתה הולך, פתאום אתה רואה יד, אחרי 100 מטר אתה רואה את הבן אדם. אתה אומר, איך היד שלו הגיע בכלל אחרי 100 מטר מפה. שמישהו תפס אותה יד ושיחק איתה.
The bodies were cut to pieces. Cut to pieces. You can't identify if it's a man or a woman. Everything was ripped.
ראיתי גופות שרופות, גם של גברים, גם של בנות.
כשאתה רואה אדם, גבר או אישה, שהגופה השרופה שלו היא בתנועת התכווצות, בתנועת התגוננות, אתה מבין שקודם שרפו ואחר כך הם מתו.
A lot of the bodies were naked, totally.
In your experience, how often have you found naked bodies?
Never. Never.
When I got out, I saw so many bodies. Their shirts were ripped off, and girls without skirts, without pants, their legs were spreaded. They were abused. The bodies were abused.
מה שראיתי שם זה דברים שלא אנושיים. אם זה גופות של בחורות שהבגדים שלהם קרועים, איזושהי פוזיציה, את יודעת, שהיא שוכבת על הגב ורגליים פתוחות. היה גם איזה אחת שאת רואה ממש על פגה של אוטו, מכופפת עם מכנס למטה. אתה רואה גופה של בחורה עם בגדים קרועים ועם איברים כרותים כאילו. אז אתה אומר לעצמך, מה, גם אנסו אותה וגם שחטו אותה וגם ביטרו אותה, מה עוד יכולים לעשות לבן אדם כאילו?
Her face was on the ground, and when I turned the body up to the other side, the shirt was down, and her tights, that she wore tights, was all covered blood. I believe in 100% she was raped.
Why do you believe she was raped?
The bullet was in the neck. So why there is blood and why the shirt is off?
We came to a house. When we picked up the mattress, we found her body. This woman, we could not identify her from her face. She was naked totally. And she had nails around her female organs. Not only nails, but different plastic, metal things. She's a woman that's so you can do whatever you want. Why? Because she's softer or...
כשאתה רואה אישה ועוד אישה ועוד אישה שהסימני פגיעה בהם במפסע, אתה מבין שזה לא משהו שנעשה באקראי. אי אפשר להגיע לאזור הזה אם זה לא מכוון לשם.
One boy with two girls. He was with the pants down, with no underwear. And the head of the girl, one of the girls, was on him, on his, just right on his penis. I just can't move on. It's difficult.
העצים האלה, כל עץ ועץ פה ראיתי בחורות קשורות, עם הידיים כפות. מישהו רצח אותם, אנס אותם, תעלל בהם, פה בעצים האלה. הרגליים שלהם היו פתוחות. מי שרואה זה יודע שהתעללו בבנות. מישהו הפשיט אותם, מישהו אנס אותם. החדירו לעברים הפנימיים שלהם כל מיני דברים, כמו קרשים, כמו ברזלים. מעל 30 בנות נרצחו ונאנסו פה. הייתי צריך לסגור את הרגליים שלהם, לכסות את הגופות שלהם, שאף אחד לא יראה מה שאני ראיתי, אף אחד. אף אחד לא יכול לראות דברים כאלה.
It's okay.
זה מישהו שבא לעשות בך כמה סוגי דברים. אם אין לו זמן, אז זה רק להרוג אותך. אם יש לו קצת זמן, הוא ישסף את הגרון. ואם יש לו יותר זמן, הוא יחתוך איברים. ואם יש לו עוד יותר זמן, הוא גם יפגע ויחלל, בפרט אם זאת אישה, הוא יחלל את הגוף שלה, לא בשביל הנאה, אלא בשביל ההשפלה. ואת זה מה שראינו.
If it's okay, I'd like to see some of what you saw.
אנחנו רואים כאן בתמונה אישה שקרעו לה את המכנסיים, ירו בה במפסעה.
As you can see, the body was brutal in different stages. This is a part of the breast.
זו אישה שירו לה כאן, זאת אישה שירו לה כאן.
Over here, and over here, and over here.
זאת בחורה שהיא הייתה ערומה, הרימו לה חצאית, הייתה עד למעלה והיא בלי תחתונים, פגעו בה.
And what is that there?
That's one foot, that's the other foot.
מכנסיים ותחתונים היו למטה.
This is the body with the nails and the parts. When we get closer and closer, you can see the nails.
Oh my God.
אין שתי אופציות של מה שהם עשו.
This is a piece of metal stuck there.
אנחנו מצאנו אותה עם מכנסיים ותחתונים למטה.
This is not connected to the body.
זאת אישה שלקחו סכין ותקעו מלמטה, שחררו החוצה.
Oh my God.
I must seem like I'm disciplined and cool and calm. I'm not, but I feel that I have to tell this story clearly. And if I start to be emotional, I may not be able to continue to talk. I was at the Shura base, which is where all the victims of the October 7th massacre were brought. There were body bags lining the corridors from the floor to the ceiling on both sides. And we never knew what we would see. We never knew what the level of the atrocity would be inside the body bag. As we did more and more of what we were tasked to do, we realized that women were not just murdered. Women were shot in the head so many times that it seemed like there was an intention, an objective to obliterate their faces. Most often, families couldn't be shown the faces of their daughters. And we began to see that some of it was sexual in nature, directly targeted sexual violence. Some came in with no clothing and mostly very bloody underwear.
Did this feel systematic to you?
Yes, it did seem systematic to use sexual violence as a weapon of war. I can't imagine why anyone in the world would have a reason to shoot a woman in the vagina or in the breast. A deliberate genital mutilation of this specific population of women.
شو اسمك الرباعي؟ أحمد نايم أحمد أبوك. لأي منظمة أنت تابع؟ حماس. قسام النخبة. دخلنا أول دار بعدين دار كانت المرأة.
طلعوا منه مرة. واحنا راجعين وراه كانوا مطلعين من جوا بنت عمرها يمكن 16 سنة أو 15 سنة. والثاني برضه كمان لابس فستان.
كانت لابسة النورات. سرقة وبلوزة بيضاء. الكلسون زهري والصدر زهري.
البنت يمكن عمرها كانت 18 سنة وكمان 21 سنة.
ومين طخيت هناك؟ طخيت مرة كبيرة. شو عملتوا في البنت؟ ايش بس قتل؟ حطيتها رميتها على ايش؟ على الكنبة واخذتها هيك نيمتها وشزحت العين وعملت اللي عملته. نمت معها. اغتصبتها.
They were sent with clear instructions to kidnap as many, to rape as many, to humiliate as many, to murder as many. They came here with a mission, and they succeeded in the mission.
How much evidence is there of the crimes of October 7th?
There's a lot of evidence. We have over 200,000 visuals that we've collected. We have over 2,000 testimonies that have been taken. Among these evidence, we have substantial evidence for sexual violence that took place on the 7th of October.
The first eyewitness who stepped forward, a young woman who hid in the bushes and described that very close to her, a few yards from her, there was a group of Hamas terrorists who pulled by the hair another woman who was stripped from the waist down.
הוא מושך לה בשיער, היה לה שיער ארוך, הוא מושך לה בשיער. היא לא לבושה, ובעצם אני מבינה שהוא אנס אותה, הוא בעצם משנע אותה. כאילו, ממש אני זוכרת את התמונה הזאת. ואז מעבירים אותה לעוד מישהו, והוא חותך לה את השד. הוא חותך לה את השד, הוא זורק את זה על הכביש, הם משחקים עם זה.
The bodies whose breasts were cut were found in several other locations. It depicts a pattern that could not have been unless it was premeditated and preconceived by Hamas themselves.
It wasn't incidental, it wasn't just happening. They learned, they did their homework. This is kind of a pattern that we're seeing, that it's not only sexual abuse, but it's sexual abuse in its worst form. It's like they wanted to inflict pain in the cruelest manner possible. I think they have redefined evil, and in ways that we will even need to redefine international criminal law.
Why? Why would the Hamas terrorists put sexual violence as part of their remit for this attack?
Using sexual violence as a tool of war, of weaponizing women, sadly as old as the history of humanity. Because when the body of the woman is violated, it symbolizes the body of the whole nation.
While I was in Gaza, I was chained for 3 weeks. I was kept in a really dark room without being able to move. And whenever I needed to go and use the bathroom, I needed to ask for permission. His name was Muhammad. He used to sit on the bed in front of me, wearing his shorts, laying down. I remember I couldn't look at him. I was just like looking away and covering myself with a blanket so I wouldn't have to look at him. It made me feel really uncomfortable. He also kept asking me, do I like sex? Do I have sex with my boyfriend? And I whenever he talked about it, I just like giggled and say, oh, come on, stop, trying to change the subject. I knew that he's up to something. I knew that something bad is gonna happen.
אחד מהמחבלים כל הזמן היה אומר לי, beautiful, beautiful. היה מביא לי מברשת לשיער, אומר לי, תעשי קוקו, זה יפה לך. הייתי עושה קוקו מול המראה, ואני עדיין בלי חזייה, כי כשלקחו אותנו הייתי בפיג'מה קצרה, והרגשתי שהוא מסתכל עליי, הוא כל הזמן קרץ לי. לקחתי את הסוואצ'ר ושמתי עליי, ואז הוא אמר לי, מה את שמה את הסוואצ'ר חם? ואז הייתה הפסקת חשמל ונכבה, ונשארנו רק אני והוא בחדר חשוך, ואני ישר באתי לצאת מהחדר, ואז הוא מעביר על היד, כאילו הוא נוגע בי, והוא אומר לי, בסדר, תחזרי לחדר.
What was going through your mind?
פחדתי ממש. כל הזמן פחדתי. היו כל כך הרבה רגעים שזה היה כמעט יותר. פשוט הגוף שלך הוא פתוח לכלל. אין לאן לברוח. וגם אם יאנסו אותי או שיקרה לי, אני עדיין פה. הקלות שבה הם עושים את זה, הכיוון נשק לראש ופשוט לעשות מה שהם רוצים, זה דבר שיכול לקרות בכל רגע. יכולים להעיר אותך באמצע הלילה ולעשות את זה לנגד עיני שאר חטופים, יכולים לקחת אותך לחדר אחר, יכולים פתאום להיכנס לך למקלחת, פתאום לשירותים, כי מי ידע גם? מי ידע?
So one day, Muhammad came and gave me women's sanitary pads. He said, dam. When you get your period, after that, you'll take a shower and you'll wash your clothes. And he kept repeating that every couple of times a day. That immediately made me feel creepy. I felt really scared, like I knew that something is about to happen. And the period was just for one day, but I fooled him to think that the period is continuing. So I remember going to the toilet, folding the pads really tight so he won't see that there's no blood. So I did it for about a week until I could not lie anymore. And he said, oh, come on, go take a shower. I told him, no, I don't want to. The water is cold. I don't want to take a shower. Please, I don't want to take a shower. And he said, no, don't worry. Don't worry. He untied me and took me to the kitchen and showed me a pot sitting on the stove. And I remember thinking, Amit, now is the moment. Something, what you thought about is gonna happen. I bent down in the bathtub like this, so I could cover myself up, taking the warm water from the pot and put it in over my head. And for 1 second, I completely forgot about everything. I just really enjoyed the warm water on my face. And then I remember hearing him saying, quickly, Amit, quickly, quickly. And then I remember I turned around. He was standing with his gun, and the gun was pointed out at me, and he was huffing and breathing heavily, and he had a face like a monster, like a beast, like this. So I stood up and held a blanket, a small blanket, to cover myself, and he came towards me and just pointed the gun really hard at my forehead, screaming at me, take it off, and punching me, until I could not hold the towel anymore. And he started touching me, and I resisted, and then he dragged me to the bedroom. And then he forced me to commit a sexual act on him. And I remember the entire time I was thinking, Amit, okay, you knew it's gonna happen. It's really happening. I said to myself, okay, you can handle this. You just want to survive. You need to survive. Your mom, your family is waiting. I just concentrated on that instead of what's really going on. And when he was finished, he went to clean himself up. I got dressed, covered myself up, and I was crying. He came in and he told me, I'm good, Amit, right? I'm good? No, I'm no good. No, I'm good. I'm your friend, right? I remember I could not look at him. I looked away. And then he got really mad. He closed the door, and I was in that room in complete darkness. Then he came in again and asked me, food? I'm good, right? I'm good. Food? And I realized that if I say no, he's gonna punish me again. So I said, yeah, food. And that's the worst part, that I'm completely dependent on him, completely dependent on the guy who just forced me to do what he forced me to do.
Of the girls you met, the hostages, how many experienced these sexual advances?
כמעט, חצי מהן חוו התעללות מינית והתעללות פיזית, ועדיין נמצאות שם ועדיין חיות עם האונס שלהן.
When you start hearing the stories, starting from psychological abuse, layer on top of that physical abuse, and there could be beating, and there could be branding. And
Branding? What do you mean? What's branding?
Branding is marking someone by burning a pattern, so they would be marked. And I got medication to sedate them. Some of the women were very concerned as to what happened when they got those medications. They didn't know.
Do you have reason to believe that the hostages left behind faced even more sexual abuse?
When I think of the people that are there for over 100 days, I'm scared of what we're gonna meet. We're ready for the unthinkable possibility of pregnancies and for needing to provide help in very, very difficult decisions that they and their loved ones would be facing when they come back.
When I was released, I was in a hospital, and a woman's doctor came to see me, to ask me about what happened. And I remember telling her that I don't know if I want to tell. I felt guilty. I felt disgusted with myself, even though I had no choice. It's really difficult to talk about. But after I talked to the lady doctor and told her, I felt like something was released, like it made it better to talk about it.
You haven't talked about this until now. Why?
I decided to talk about it only after I heard that people are trying to say that it didn't happen. So I decided that I need to talk. I need to talk for women. I need to talk because I won't forgive myself if I will still see people that are saying that those things didn't happen when I know that they did.
Now, I want to shout and talk to the world and let them know what's going on there. If I can help someone, if I can help the people who are still there, I want to. I feel like it's my calling to do so.
I was in the scenes, and I'm the eyes, and I'm the mouth that can speak and can shout and can scream, because no one else could do it. We were there. Not only we, I was there. My hands, my eyes, and by speaking out, standing there, I'm respecting them.
Most of the victims were murdered and silenced forever, but we know that there are survivors. And it will take a very long time before they speak out, if ever they speak out.
We may never know the extent of the sexual violence because these women were silenced. So every one of us, women and men, must speak up for these women and say, we will bear your story, we will bear witness for you. You will not be forgotten, and what happened to you will be told.
So we're almost done shooting. What are your thoughts at this moment?
It's been an honor to do this. This is the most important work of my life. And maybe everything I've done has led to this moment.
Why? Why do you feel that way?
You know, I've spent a lot of time in my life advocating for women, and it felt like this was a moment where we needed to be really honest and direct about what happened. Rape is never acceptable. And in this moment, since October 7th, I felt like we were sliding back to a place where we would start accepting the unacceptable. And I can't let that happen.
Can you tell me what resonates the most from everything you've heard?
You just hear the story after story after story. People who have not met each other telling us the same things over and over. And I have to believe that we will tell these stories and give these amazing witnesses the chance for people to hear from them in their words in this film what happened. Anyone who watches this film can bear witness, and we can take that, and we can take that pain and take that trauma and turn it into hope, turn it into commitment, turn it into conviction that we are not going to let this happen again.
When I'm scared of myself, I can't make a sound. And if I'm trying to talk, my head meets the ground. I'm laying right there, chained and unarmed. No, don't try to save me, I can't handle fear. And if you try to save me, I would disappear. Let it all be, I can't handle fear. I wanna be reborn, I wanna be reborn. I wanna be reborn, I wanna be reborn. I wanna be reborn, I wanna be reborn. I wanna be reborn, I wanna be reborn, I wanna be reborn. When it's getting darker, it's my time to shine, like a star in the sky. Yours is just like mine. We're laying right there, waiting for a sign. No, don't try to save me, 'cause I can't handle fear. Water falls around me, this time it's not my tears. Let it all be, now it's getting clear. I wanna be reborn, I wanna be reborn. I wanna be reborn, I wanna be reborn.
If I could ask the Koleinu team to please put their cameras back on, I'd be very grateful for that. Wendy, Roseanne, hard to watch. Almost, I'd say, traumatic.
Yes, I was just saying to Wendy, it's the second time I've, seen it now, and it was worse for me the second time around. Yeah, no words. You really are.
And yet we were talking earlier about the silence of many of the women's groups in South Africa who have spoken out on international issues before, but yet have remained silent in the face of this. How do you continue to work with organizations such as that when, in their view, Jews just don't count?
Yeah. Well, I suppose we take a bit of solace from the couple that do speak out. I mean, there was an open letter written by the Women's Action Campaign of South Africa, which has been calling on everybody to sign this petition to call on government and on civil society to condemn the rapes wherever you find them, no matter what your political allegiance. That's been signed by 3,500 people, and the Rape Crisis Center signed that. So yeah, you look for the, as Nitsana said, for the friendly faces, for the few that will support us, and you build bridges there, and you try and, just manage the loss and the pain and the desolation of being abandoned by the rest of civil society. Just go forward.
And I think that Koleinu is well placed to be making a big noise about the denialism, lack of condemnation. And we have, I mean, we're writing articles, we're constantly talking about this. It's become a huge part of our daily work that we do in Koleinu. And I think, you know, we can do what we can do, and we're well placed to be able to have a voice for these victims. But I think everybody can also, you know, play a part and just not accept the silence, not accept the justification. We're living in one of the rape capitals of the world. You know, how dare organizations that claim to stand up for women's rights, how dare they keep silent? How dare they justify? How dare they not condemn? We don't want to hear about your politics. We're not interested in, you know, countries that you like or dislike. We're interested in the fact. We want to hear that rape and sexual torture and violation is unacceptable in any context, no matter what. And as Nitsana said, the level of torture is unprecedented in terms of what happened on October the 7th. So, you know, if you claim to stand up for women's rights, then speak up and condemn this. And we will keep shouting as Koleinu, and we will keep being in their faces and you know, doing what we can do to not let these victims have suffered in vain, and these poor souls that lost their lives, to not be their voices. And you know, to show documentaries like this is so important because it bears witness, it gives them a voice.
Melanie, Aletta says that it was devastating to watch, and I think it was. I don't think anyone who watched doesn't have this pit in their stomach from having watched it. How do we get the message out more? How do we get more people to see this? How do we get people to understand that rape never has a context? And if it does have a context, you can't say a woman in a short dress has asked for it.
Yeah.
Because that's the natural. There is either right or wrong on this issue. There's no compromise. There's no context. There's no excuse. There's no mitigating factor. Rape is rape.
Correct. But I think people need to understand that this is, you know, it's worldwide. Firstly, it doesn't only happen in war. It doesn't only happen in Cape Town, in South Africa, which is the rape capital of the world. I've read up on the college campuses of America, where the victim is never believed. It's always, as you said, were you wearing a short dress? Did you have too much alcohol? Did you turn him on? And there's, I think it's time that the world understood that they have to be there for the victim and not for the abuser. As Roseanne said, we at Koleinu are trying to do our utmost, but we are a little voice, you know, shouting out to other women's organizations in South Africa. And we need people behind us all the time to back us.
So how can people help Koleinu, both in this mission as well as you guys do such remarkable work looking after the victims of sexual violence in South Africa? How can people assist you? And while you do that, I'm going to ask Dylan to post your website details on the chat as well, and Johannesburg and Cape Town details too.
Well, one of our missions really for our community has been report. Because we find there's an invisible wall behind which people find themselves in our community, both across the spectrum, from the very secular to the very religious and all in between, where people do not want to report violence, sexual violence. And we understand the reasons for it. There are many, but at the same time, there's no recourse without a report. You know, if we want to hold a perpetrator accountable, there needs to be a report made to the authorities with a signature, with a criminal case opened. We will support those victims in court. We will hold their hands right through, from making the decision, right through to making the report, to going to court. We'll be there with them. But we need to see a turnaround in our community, which hasn't yet happened. There are very few cases where you can say the Johannesburg, Cape Town or Durban Jewish community is reporting cases of sexual abuse to the authorities. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, there's a lack of trust in our justice system. But when it comes to sexual violence, and these cases are generally handled better. They are handled well. There's specialized units for sexual offences that you can go to that really prosecute these cases right through to the end. But we need to break through this barrier, and we need to come forward, because until we do that, perpetrators in our community are at large, and they're free because they know that there'll be no accountability. So why would they stop? So until this changes, really our community is at risk. So this is one of the ways we can all get behind Koleinu's work in making our community a safer space for everyone, is to report.
So
I just wanted to give.
Sure, Mel.
Yeah. I just wanted to say it's one of the most difficult things to come forward and report, because there's there's the shame factor, there's the embarrassment factor, and who will believe me, and am I doing the right thing, and what is my family going to say? And I think, as Wendy says, this is what we have to get across to everybody, to know that Koleinu is there for you, and we'll help you and we'll guide you. But the most difficult thing is to come forward.
But someone doesn't have to come forward to the police. They can come forward to you. You will counsel them. If their decision is to not prosecute, you'll be respectful of their decision. But to remain silent, you ultimately always blame yourself, even though you're the victim. So you must be able to talk to someone about it. You must be able to get counseling for it. You need to be able to get the assistance of professionals and experts in this process. And please God, yourself, you get justice for yourself for what you've been through as well. That's one of the options too.
I think, Howard, if I can just add that, we often get people offering to volunteer and help us and do social media and etc., which is amazing, and we certainly, take them up on that. But I think if we could appeal to the community where they could really help us, is to be a community that supports victims, that doesn't victim blame, that encourages, a victim is only going to come forward where they feel safe to do so. So be a community that stands behind the victims, that doesn't protect the perpetrator, that doesn't, throw in all bandy around the terms of Lashon Hara and Masira and all these things that, that kind of blame the victims for ruining a perpetrator's life. Rather support the victim, rather stand behind the victim, and then make it a safe space for them to come forward, so that we can do our work in supporting them. But there's nothing we can do if somebody stays silent out of fear of coming forward, so yeah.
Because there's often both denialism, and even when people believe, they would rather sweep some of these things under the carpet rather than expose the perpetrators. And of course, the moment you don't expose the perpetrators, someone else is going to become a victim. You don't know what you don't know. And if we allow perpetrators in our own community, there will be more and more victims. We have to, as a community, take a stand within our own community and within South Africa, which, as you've all said, is literally the rape capital of the world.
Yeah, and one of the things we found is that people say, well, if I were to share that I was, let's say, a victim of child sexual abuse, who would want to marry me? And there might be a fear of communal censure and sanction, to expose oneself as having been a victim. But what people don't understand is if they don't come forward and get the help they need to deal with that trauma, they carry it into their marriage, and the marriage suffers. So the keeping silent is just not helpful, bearing that burden of shame, which most people will take to their graves, but it's just not helpful. So if people can come forward earlier, they can really, really turn their lives around. And that's as the one you saw in the documentary, the one lady said how just a burden lifted from her shoulders once she had already just told one person. So I think the sharing is the first step on the road to healing.
Yeah. David is asking us, is it possible to show the documentary to others? And David, obviously tonight's broadcast is available on YouTube, and it will remain in perpetuity on YouTube, so you can definitely show it to people. Or you can Google the documentary itself is available on YouTube to show to people. But it should be shown within Parliament. And it should be shown at women's conferences, and it should be shown at men's conferences. It should be shown to everyone, because everyone needs to understand our job is to bear witness for the victims. And this is our moment to make sure that people truly understand what happened on the 7th of October. And it's not good enough to say never again. And yet it happens again and again. We have to, everyone, take a stand.
Yeah,
With that, I want to thank the team from Koleinu for partnering with us this evening in showing the documentary and getting Nitsana onto the program, and for protecting so many victims within our own community as well as the broader South Africa. You are truly great warriors of our community. I know we've gone on now for 2.5 hours and it's getting late and people need to go to bed before a school night. But I just want to thank everyone who joined us this evening. It's been a remarkable evening, and we've dealt some really difficult topics. We've seen some great trauma, I think we've all been through watching the movie together. But at the same time, when you look at both Nitsana and the people from Koleinu and the remarkable work that they do to bring justice to the victims, you have to be uplifted, and you certainly have to be inspired. With that, I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. Dylan will post the Koleinu details again on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Zoom for everyone who wants to get in contact with organizations. And just really strength to all of you. It's just such an honor and privilege to host you all. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thanks, Howard.
Good night. Get off. Just stopped.